Odin's beard. For an ugly troll, you're a fighter. I'd be your friend. What do you say? Odin wills it.
Spoilers?
Check.
Mature language?
Check.
Should listeners be advised?
Check.
The Marvel superheroes have arrived. The American
Fantastic Four.
Hulk, Spider-Man, Iron Man,
Spider-Woman.
the God of Thunder, Mighty Thor.
Welcome to the Marvel Superheroes Podcast. I'm Diabolu Frank, and with me are
Fryhole.
The machine.
Fryhole. Who's your favorite Marvel superhero?
Probably Thor.
Hey, Matt, you got a relationship with Thor?
Bisexual.
You're going to ask me if I have a relationship with Thor.
Okay, I'll let you think about it for a second.
I legit collected Thor. I legit collect Thor through the Mighty Thor run.
I did that too. Warren Ellis started it, and then William Esther Loebs did it, and it was all Deodato in his studio. That's like one of the only times I ever collected Thor for any length of time.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously,
Where he was shirtless in the blue pants.
Yeah, he had the
Long
halter
hair.
top.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck they were thinking when they
Well,
did that.
no, but then they ditched the halter top, and he basically just like had.
Oh, he was running around bare chest for the rest of the time. Somebody realized what a bad look that was.
I think that was when I wasn't collecting Thor anymore.
You didn't get the World Engine stuff? Because they did.
Yeah, all the
They
World
did the Heroes.
I've read World Engine, but because didn't he fight the Hulk during that time?
I think at some point he did, yeah.
The Hulk was like kind of maestroing out a bit, like in the Arctic or something. I seem to remember
No, that
something.
actually that was in the Hulk run. That was during the Incredible Hulk run.
Was it?
I think Angel Medina drew that
yeah,
one.
maybe. Yeah, you're right.
Maybe
Because
you
I
were
remember
like,
the
yeah.
pointy nose. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right.
For a second there, I thought you might be talking about the time when Hercules fought Hulk too in that one special.
That was, I do know I have 2 copies of that book because I thought I lost one of them, but that's one of my favorite Hulk stories.
Yeah, that one was actually pretty cool.
Don't ask me why. It's not, there's nothing particularly awesome about it, but it was a good fight.
Except when he beats the shit out of Hercules.
Yeah.
Just destroys him.
Well, that was the point, is that Hercules was kind of depowered. And
Well,
it
and
was showing
Hercules, he
maturity.
had gotten up, said something like, that's fine, but if you knock me down again.
I'll get up again. No, ain't nobody gonna let me down, or what?
Was that a Chumbawamba reference?
That was a Chumbawamba
Yeah,
reference.
Fucker.
I thought we were getting Rick rolled. I was let you down, never gonna pick you up, was it?
Never gonna let you down. Never gonna run around and desert you. Never gonna make you cry. Never gonna
Nice.
say goodbye. When I was living in Nevada, it was kind of, I guess it was an upscale.
I didn't know you lived in Nevada.
Yeah, I lived in a suburb of Nevada.
Did
and
you
it was,
ever
it was,
go
it
to
was
one?
moneyed. Huh?
Did you ever go to one?
He was
What, the
too young.
casinos?
A bunny ranch.
I was a fucking teenager. I was underage.
Which end of teens?
Yeah, that, and we were at low rate nickel slot kind of places most of the time too when we were trucking around. But anyway, the neighborhood itself was moneyed and I wasn't, so the disparity was really traumatizing. But anyway, one of the things that was interesting is the school buses, they actually played music on the school buses. They would be piped in through speakers throughout it. And for some reason that song was popular at the time, and so I heard that damn thing like almost every morning. That, and I remember there was a dance version of I Beg Your Pardon, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden that was popular at that time. And for some reason it always seemed to be playing on that fucking bus.
Which song? I'm not sure which song that is.
I'm standing.
I still don't know that fucking song.
Fix it. Your Thor background.
The TV series with Incredible Hulk versus Thor.
Dope.
Yeah,
Dope.
about it. I've never collected Thor. I've read Garthinus's Thor story. I know he had a magic stick that he would tap on the ground and turn into a Thor. And I think he was a paramedic. I don't know, dude. I've only been really introduced to Thor lately with all the Avengers movies and stuff. I never collected them. Though I remember you did have that dope ass cover of him fighting. Was it the Easter Island planet Hulk? Who was that one metal? The
Beta Ray Bill.
No. Remember, there's a rock creature that joins Hulk, and
He was in the first issue of Thor. He was
they had contact with Thor, and Thor like beat the hell out of him, murdered all of them.
Well,
Yeah,
that was back when his Tales to Astonish, right?
Yeah,
that was old school.
I mean, all I knew about Thor was
Tales of Astonish?
when you would see like old Marvel stuff, you would see Hulk and Spider-Man, and then Thor's head with his little wing. Oh, and Adventures of Babysitter. I remember seeing that about Thor too, and I was thinking,
we mentioned
I
that.
thought
They always showed his locks too, his long, lovely locks, his lady
his
locks.
very Aryan locks. You mean goose stepping across the forehead? But yeah. So that's about it. I do not know Thor.
I collect.
You remember who played Thor in Avengers: You're Sitting, right?
Yeah.
No.
No, what's his name? Kingpin.
Oh wait, that's no way.
Yeah.
Full Metal Jacket. Gomer Pyle.
In the cell with J-Lo?
What the fuck is his name?
Scared of that movie because of the little teeth. He always is like, the little teeth.
I never saw this album.
Well, no, we went.
It is, yeah, it's trippy, man.
Yeah, we went with Pussycat to go see the movie, and Frank, and then we were excited. I'm like, I don't want to see this movie. I don't want to see this movie.
I remember when you guys saw it. I remember when you saw it.
We went to go see it, and they loved it, dude. I sat there, I was like, I thought it was a really long music video. It felt like a really long ass music. But wait a minute, what the fuck is his exact name? Frank.
Vincent D'Onofrio.
Vincent D'Onofrio.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to get Frank.
He's not franking us. It's not. That's something we didn't know.
Frank
We were just.
foreplay. That's Frank foreplay.
We were gapping on the
just
name.
the tip. That's just the tip.
Just the tip.
I tried to collect some of the Simons and stuff, but you can never fucking find the Simons Thor stuff anywhere in back
singles?
issues. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that a good read? The Simonson
I
stuff?
just said I didn't have it all.
What's the end of our theme song, motherfucker? You've sung it enough fucking
The
times.
Mighty Thor.
So we're 60 episodes into this fucking thing. Thor's in our fucking theme song. We need to be schooled. And I think that Fry Hole, our special guest, our wild agent of Marvel, school us on Thor. What's your history with Thor?
Let me say I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller on this podcast.
Good.
I am not as knowledgeable as far as who wrote whatever and even drew at times whatever. I just read it as a kid and liked it. I'm half Norwegian, and growing up, me and my sister got dropped off at my grandma's quite a bit, and she was full Norwegian.
Like she wore like helmets with fur on.
No, but she
Like,
lived.
how authentic are we talking?
She lived in a town
Did she
in
get, like,
Wisconsin
Did she get
that's
spooked
like a
by Native
Norwegian town.
Did
Like
Native Americans always spook her and she'd
They
have fun?
plundered the neighbors' houses. Come on, boys, get on the longboat going across the
she knew how to make a longboat.
Did she? Did she eat chicken with her hands?
No, but they made some nasty stuff, dude. Like lutefisk. It's like
lutefisk
this.
is fucking
It's like jellyfish.
Yeah.
Like not jellyfish that
It's like
float. It's like
fermented.
fucking fish that have turned to jelly.
Yeah, they fermented
and
it or
it's,
whatever.
It's the grossest shit ever. It is so gross.
So that's how you know they're Viking when they can eat that shit.
You're like a foot away from the microphone. You were here and you leaned in like this. Sorry.
So I would always read books about trolls and stuff like that. She always had like Norwegian-based books, and there was a bunch about Odin and his two sons, Thor and Loki. I think that's where it started, kind of. Yeah, this was more like direct.
You're like
direct
my
folklore.
grandmother
It had nothing to do with.
She had a chunk of the Simonson run.
She pulled out the stone tablets.
Yeah.
Learn about your past.
Yeah, but no, I was reading Captain America, G.I. Joe. We didn't have a comic shop. We had a drugstore that had he would rotate out different titles, and I remember one had, I don't know who wrote it, but it was Thor versus Juggernaut, and Excalibur was in it. They were on some different medieval world that Juggernaut was trying to take over.
Sounds familiar.
They duked it out, and man, it was a cool comic. So after that, I tried getting a hold of everything I could on Thor. I read some of the Simonson stuff. His Beta Ray Bill stuff is sick, dude. It's fantastic.
Nobody draws better Ray Bill.
No,
not
man. And actually, before Beta Ray Bill turned into Beta Ray Bill, I guess, the look that Simonson came up with him, he looked freaking awesome there, too. His Malik the Dark Elf stuff was pretty good. It seemed to me like he'd go off on tangents, though.
I just don't...
It would be like a bunch of boring stories in a row, and that it just didn't keep it
He
interesting
wrote that
enough.
stuff, too, right?
I think he wrote it.
Yeah,
he drew it.
Wrote it and drew it. I got back into it when Jurgens was on it, and which is a parallel to a story that they just did with the God Bomb stuff.
Oh yeah,
When they revamped him, because
Jason Aaron.
that is almost the exact same story that Jurgens did. Now they put Thor into an alternate timeline or whatever, but it all started out with this dude that was hunting gods.
Really?
Yeah, he looked like Darkseid with some green armor and stuff on him. I think Thor chopped him with that axe from the Executioner, and that's how he had started his rise toward. In this alternate story, he moves Asgard into Earth's atmosphere or whatever.
Well, see, I'm trying to work out the timeline. When did they do Ragnarok? Where Michael Avon Oeming? No, that was during that other run. Okay, so you had the Mike Deodato stuff, and then that went into Journey into Mystery, where they had the Red Norval character running the show for a little bit. Then that series got canceled entirely. During that time period, they moved Thor into the Heroes Reborn universe, where he was an Avenger and being drawn by Liefeld and Chap Yape and all that kind of stuff. Then they all came back, and that's when Jurgens and John Romita Jr. revamped the character. I read some of the early stuff, and I thought that was really good too. I thought that John Romita Jr. was a really good match for Thor. And then Romita Jr. left. I think wasn't Tom Rennie drawing it for a little while there?
That's when I jumped on.
Okay.
Because I can't stand John Romita Jr. I think that he is just horrible.
Thor was terrible.
I liked this Thor personally, but I fell in love with John Romita Jr. I had read him on Amazing Spider-Man and I loved him, or liked him there okay. But when he got on to Uncanny X-Men, he was like my favorite Uncanny X-Men artist during my favorite period on the book. And he was such a great 80s style. I thought it really reflected the time period while still like that.
All sketchy.
Yeah, he was still smoother back then too, but he had more of his distinct style. Well, for me, he was sort of like the epitome of Marvel because he had his dad's style, but he also looked like both of the Buscema brothers, and it felt like such a Marvel artist. That's why it was such a betrayal for me when he started working for DC, because that style belongs at Marvel. It came up in the House of Ideas. So, and I thought with Thor, this big burly dude with a fucking hammer, I thought that was a great combination. The problem that I have is that at a point in the early 90s, John Romita Jr. started having Klaus Janson ink every fucking thing he does. And it was great on The Punisher. There was a great combination. I thought it gave him that grit to work on the character. And what a lot of people
disagree with you there.
You didn't like that either?
His Punisher was the worst.
I loved his Punisher. It was the first time he looked like an Italian.
Okay, I'll give you he did the busted nose kind of, that kind of drawing. But Punisher is a down to earth, gritty, everything in real. His guns were like laser gun looking. I mean, it looked like a Buck Rogers comic book.
Then John Romita Jr. has a problem with drawing anybody that isn't like the size of a tree trunk.
Yeah.
Even the women.
The only time, to be honest with you, the only time I've ever liked his artwork was in Iron Man Armor Wars 2, I think. I enjoyed it.
Oh, Armor Wars 2, that was, yeah.
It was when the armor had the big trash can boots.
The boots, yeah, the big boots.
Yeah, so.
And I don't know if Jansen was doing him back then.
It might have been Klaus Janson.
Yeah,
because everybody was all pissed off because when John Romita Jr. was on Iron Man originally, inked by Bob Layton, and then when he was making big return to Iron
when John Byrne was writing it.
With John Byrne, yeah, then he was the big blocky, sketchy.
Yeah,
it looks like rough pencils.
Yeah,
it had to be Klaus.
It might well have been. See that I wasn't paying any. I honestly, I paid no attention to that run.
I can't blame.
Let me
Klaus Janson.
fix. Okay, John Romita did World War Hulk. Did that not ruin it for you? I mean, because I was so pumped up after Planet Hulk and everything. I'm like, World War Hulk, dude, he's coming down to whoop some ass. It's going to look cool. And then...
Okay, if we're talking about artist, I mean, I like his style. It fits certain books well, and other books it don't.
Mind.
It does. It fits some books well. Some stuff sometimes he does. I don't think it worked very well. I liked when he did Kick-Ass. All the Kick-Ass books he did, I thought his style fit pretty nice with those books. His Hulk is a little blocky for my taste. I still think Dale Keown and Jeff Purvis did the best Hulks.
Hulkbuster armor, dude, he's horrible. He's not as bad as Rob Liefeld, but he's pretty bad.
There's worse artists, dude, that give work that I have to like dredge through their artwork just to get through the story. As long as the story for me, I told you, dude, story's good for me. Art, I can deal with like secondhand.
See, that's so weird because
I know you're the opposite.
Comics are a visual medium. They definitely have to have story, but they should look good too.
Well, when I start doing the voices in my head, it's fine. I can get through the story that way. The artwork can be crap. Right now, trust me, I think I'm reading one of Rick Remita books or Reminder books or whatever. Yeah. And the artwork is bad, dude, but the story's pretty good. So, I mean, I've known you for a long time, dude, and you're huge about art. He hates certain artists. And you've literally given me a book just for the fact that you're like, I can't look at this book. Just take it.
Bob Wycheck.
Bob Wycheck.
Inked him on his second Avenger run.
That's me skipping a lot, but I found that weird how good Godbomb did.
I was going to ask you too, was that the period, because when John Romita Jr. was doing it, he was like the classic Kirby Thor, with the exception I think he had more black on, didn't he? Yeah. Or was it exactly the Kirby Thor?
Well, no, it was very similar to the Kirby Thor.
So he was still in the blue. I think it was when Straczynski was doing it. That's when he went to the black and silver. Tommy Rennie comes in, and that's when he grows the beard back.
Yep.
And by the way, I always prefer Thor with the beard. He looks so much better like that. He looks more legit like that. And didn't he have a different, like a horny hat or something, like a different, like a more ornate helmet at that point?
Like a
really ornate, like look more like a legit Viking kind of thing.
Chrome shell with a spike on it.
Yeah, I think it had like designed like sculpture in it or something.
The wings were more up facing frontwards than they were on the sides. Mm-hmm. He had like scale armor. He had the big bucklers, but they had chains between them. It looked more realistic armored.
Yeah. And was Thor Girl a part of that too? Or did she come before then?
Thor Girl was at the beginning of that.
The Tom Rennie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So what, can you tell me what her deal is? I don't know what the fuck was going on with her.
From what it seemed to me is they were going to use her and then just kind of forgot about her is the way I felt. Thor-Girl. She played almost like they were going to branch off and she was going to take over. She had her own little mallet. Man, I'm trying to remember some of the stuff. It's been a while.
So wait, so everything that Jason Aaron just did was kind of already been
Done.
Really? I didn't know that.
And done, not just like where you say, hey, this story's been done by another comic. This story was done in Thor within the last 10 years.
Because I was reading the Jason Aaron stuff, and I was like, man, this is a really cool idea.
Well, and everyone, I mean, down at the comic shop I go to, I mean, it was a big book. It was big sales.
And they didn't realize that the story had already been told.
And I told you when I read it, I'm like, it's awesome, but I'm like, this is like the same story from like, granted, it's not the exact, but they took part of the story.
The same concept.
Part of the concept.
Yeah, and just redid it. And I was like, wow.
That's one of the problems I have as a Wonder Woman fan is new people come onto the book that have never read the book before. And so they look at the character and they have like the basics from things like JLA or the odd book that they did run, the odd run that they read or something like that. And they'll often tell the same story or they'll create a brand new character that's exactly like a pre-existing character, think they're doing something new because they never looked back and saw what other people did that other people had already had that idea. And I think sometimes they're afraid that it's going to contaminate their idea. But the problem is so many of the people who read comic books these days have so many years invested in the medium. They have read those stories and it's hard not to call bullshit when some guy unintentionally, parallel thinking and all, copies what somebody else has already done.
Yeah.
But what I was wondering with Thor-Girl was Dan Jurgens just like he wanted to have Supergirl and Thor and he just had his own Supergirl there?
I think so. But like I said, she was there. They seemed like they wanted to go in the direction that maybe she would take over or at least be a big part of the book. And then they moved into that alternate timeline where Thor becomes a despot. He fights Iron Man. That's where you first see the Iron Man Asgard armor. And they bust up Captain America's shield and he has to use his hammer to knock out the dents. And at that point, he had already moved Asgard over to, I don't know if it was New York or wherever. And he was hooked up. He put the Enchantress. And Thor-Girl, if memory serves, became part of some like resistance. Because then the book jumped to where he was older and he had a son. To me, it was a very enjoyable storyline. And the artwork was really pleasing.
I love Tom Rainey's artwork. He never has long runs on books. He was one of the last really good guys on Uncanny before I finally quit reading the title. And he still produces spot artwork that I think Comic Vine virtually every week has some stuff he's doing on con stuff. And it's glorious. It's so great looking. But the guy's one of these dudes who packs so much detail into one image that in terms of getting books out, he's just never been great at it.
Well, that's one thing you could say about Ramita. He can do 52 books at once and have them all come out
Wasn't
on
he
time.
doing 2 books at once? Or did they switch a book of his to weekly or some shit like that?
I think he was doing Thor and a Spider-Man book at the
Thor
same
and
time throughout his run.
Yeah,
That's not the only time he's done 2 books a month, but I think specifically that's what was happening there. I think he was doing Amazing Spider-Man with Straczynski at the same time that he was doing Thor.
Yeah, that's I'll definitely, I mean, a lot of people probably hate me jumping on him, but I'll give him his props there, man. For the fans, he definitely.
I'll tell you though, there were a lot of people that hate. I love Romita Jr., but I don't necessarily like a lot of the stuff he's done in recent years. It's just gotten too far. And again, I'm tired of Klaus Janson inking him. I wish anybody else would ink him at this point because I'm just so sick of that combo. And Klaus Janson, personally, I think he's a pale shadow of his former self too. So it bothers me when he inks anybody anymore. But also, I will say there are a lot of people on the internet. I've read it. They just cannot stand John Romita Jr. and never liked him. So you're not alone in that.
You know, and we were talking about this earlier tonight with how much ink can change a pencil drawing. I would think, I like doing sculpture, but I occasionally draw. I'm by no means an artist. If I was a popular artist, man, I'd want different people inking my stuff. After a while, I'd want to switch up just to get that different look. But I guess if he's going with what's giving him paychecks. Yeah,
but I think part of it is he's like your dude.
Really?
And you keep your dude employed. So that's what happens. Like he's part of your team. So wherever you go, you switch to a new book, you bring your crew with, you know what I mean?
But Klaus Janson's a big enough name on his own to go and do stuff though, ain't he?
I don't think he can produce artwork on his own, especially for a book anymore. I just don't think he's got the skill set anymore. He's been inking for so long. I never was really wild about him as a penciler anyway. He was great on Frank Miller. He was great in the 70s as an inker. He did some really interesting stuff with Gil Kane, but I don't think he has the game to do anything on his own anymore. And I really don't like him inking really anybody. I'm sorry. I'm just not a champion of that guy even having a career at this point. I think he's kind of,
holy
wow.
Shit.
He's fucking, he doesn't have the skills anymore. I'm sorry.
I love it. Say it real. Rob Liefeld, you've never drawn a background in your life, ever.
I think he wants to burn him at the stake now.
Let me ask a question.
Wait, are you allowed to fucking do that on our podcast?
I'm sorry.
He's a special guest.
I thought I was like
special guest.
A
No,
guest.
go ahead, ask one.
You go to a con, you can get original art. Is there ever inkers there that you can bring your own art and say, hey, ink this?
No, but I've had inkers actually. I've bought artwork that they ink, and then they would give me original drawings of their stuff.
And it's
the goon, Powell.
Oh,
Eric Powell. So
Dude, he's awesome.
I bought some Kyle Hott's artwork, and Powell had inked them. And as a thank you, he threw in a small drawing of the Hulk before the goon came out. Any of that stuff came out.
He can draw anything, dude. He's
And,
awesome.
and his penciling, I was like, I remember asking Frank, I'm like, who the hell is this? I'm like, this is fantastic. And he's like, oh, he's an inker. And like I said, this is before he even came out. It's a full head shot, the Hulk roaring,
Yeah.
teeth and everything. And
You have that?
yeah, I have it. It's in my collection because for a while there,
I've never seen it because I probably would have.
That I was on I was on a tear for a while where I was buying
would've
original
stole
artwork.
it from you. I would have said, hey, man, I'm going to take this comic, and I would have slid it in there, and
Oh no, dude, it looks beautiful.
I would have walked out with it.
I'll show it to you.
You don't even know where it's at.
Yeah, dude, it's in my collection. It's the same book, dude. I got the idea from Frank. I have a book.
Dude, it's probably got 4 of my books sitting on top of it.
and some of Frank.
Probably, yeah. They're probably holding
Stack
it in
of
place.
it's a stack of Patsy Walkers that he can't find.
Oh my god, that I have to read eventually. But yeah, no, I've come across inkers that sometimes I think their work is actually better than the art. Some of the artwork I got.
But I mean, wouldn't that make sense if you're an inker and your career's mostly gone? I'm going to go to shows and people.
well, I mean,
just bring me
you
there.
could call him an inker or tracer, whichever you want.
Tracer. Well,
Sounds mean, but
I just want
does that ever happen?
Can I just say, I don't know what Mr. Fixit talking about. There were inkers at this show. If you give them a piece of artwork and you pay them, they'll ink whatever the fuck you want them to ink.
Okay.
So if you want your piece inked by somebody, you can get that done. You just got to pay for it.
And there we go.
yeah, but doesn't it?
So, by the way, did one of the Kubert boys have a run on Thor after John Romita Jr.? Because I'm looking at the Comic Vine right now, and I didn't even remember that happened.
Yes. I don't remember when, though. I thought Mike Diabolu did a run on Thor where Thor fought Gladiator.
Well, wait a minute, I got a question. What do Thor stories usually revolve around? Is it like Ragnarok happening, or is everyday life trying to deal with mortals, or because like
Oh, that's a good fuck way.
yeah, because like
Holy shit.
My favorite
Hey.
character I know very little about.
I
just
took
like
a
to see
nap.
him fight.
I took a nap. Damn
I
it.
can tell you took a nap.
Yeah, I
dude.
took a
That was
nap. I
fucking-
feel good right now. I'm awake.
Sometimes the most obvious questions are the ones we should be asking.
Well, it's because I sit here and I think about each of us have our own favorite character, and we all read those books, and you can, when we talk about them, you'll come out with what their dealings are.
Here's an example. Like Iron Man, nobody fucking reads Iron Man comic books, but we all know, okay, well, he was a drunk for a while. He gets fucking techno diseases of various types.
Sexual.
Yeah, all right. He's a playboy. He's a millionaire. He's got businesses. You got hostile takeovers. You got all sorts. So those are stories, right? Well, then we had this conversation about fucking Wonder Woman, and we were like, "Fuck is a Wonder Woman story? Like, what happens in a Wonder Woman story? What goes on? Like, I remember Brian Boland covers, and that's all. I don't actually fucking know a single, like, she has a monthly comic book. What is going on in these comic books? And a lot of the ways when you think about Thor, it's the same way. Well, what is this?
It's a god,
What
yeah.
does a mystical powered god do? And for a while there, I bet you it was like the Hulk, where he was just a big dumb Hulk. But
Well,
they managed to go
the-
hundreds of issues of him just
But-
flying through space fighting monsters until Peter David got in there and started going into his psyche.
Oh yeah, and see, and with the Hulk, it's always been the Heckle and Jive. Was it
Heckle and Jive.
No, the Dr. Was it Jekyll and Mr. Hyde theory where you had these two sides battling constantly. I could get why certain books were, I mean, that's why that book
But
worked for me.
well, okay, I guess there was. something
Yeah,
at the beginning.
no, even in the
Well,
past.
in the beginning for Thor, Odin said, "You're speaking to me the way you shouldn't. You need to learn humility. So I'm trapping you in this
Donald-
lame
oh, okay, right.
Donald Blake, the lame doctor, lame as in like injured leg."
But see, I was just always wondered about that because I kind of like Mac just said, I can remember covers, but I can't ever, except for the Garth Ennis run, I don't ever think I've read a comic book, or in the Jason Aaron run that you loaned me that I read. I can't think of any like Thor books that I sat there and I'm like, damn, that was a good Thor book.
Let's kick back to that Garth run shortly.
Oh yeah, where he fights the Vikings. Yeah, this was cool.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember I was working at a comic shop when that was coming out, and
I think I met you there.
There were people who had never read a Thor comic book or anything like that, and were like, "Holy shit!"
What was that all about? Big picture, because I might.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm sure it's on
Vikings-
Marvel Unlimited,
Yeah.
so I could fucking
Yeah.
read it.
Viking zombies
Or Awaken.
through a blood curse.
I imagine, are there lots of blood curses in Thor?
There's a
it sounds
few.
like something
There's a
that they
few,
could,
yeah.
I figured in Asgard that's sort of like a just buzz.
Yep.
Oh, it's just a blood curse.
And Doctor Strange actually is hilarious. he's in it. Man, he's talking trash to Thor the entire time.
Really?
Basically, these Viking zombies show up that have been sailing forever. They're really powerful because of the blood curse.
Like sailing through space, basically? Or?
The sailing just in the water in a mist.
Not important.
Yeah, they would have gone crazy and ate each other, but they're zombies and they've been traveling for thousands of years. But they're super powerful.
They beat the shit out of Thor, dude.
Like, Thor smacks one of them with his hammer and his fucking arm breaks. Doc Strange has to go back and get ancestors of the dude with the blood curse, and then they all drink, like, peyote and...
Okay, I'm interested. Let's not talk about
Dude,
it anymore.
it's...
Now I actually might want to scroll through and
It's a fun book,
it's a
man.
weird
It
book.
brought a lot of people back to Thor.
Well, I said I'd never read a Thor
Or to
book.
Thor, for that matter.
I'd never read a Thor book, and because Garth Ennis wrote it, I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. And I remember reading it, and I was like, holy shit, this is actually really cool. And then I never read another Thor book after that run. And then Jason Aaron came on, and I started reading it, and just like Fry was saying, I was like, holy shit, this is really cool. And now to find out, oh, well, this is kind of retread. Like, we've gone this way before. But for someone like me who had never read Thor, I was like, holy shit, like, you got this character going around killing gods, and apparently Thor is worshipped on other worlds. And I was like, I thought that was really neat. Like, I had never read something that unique. And so, I don't know.
Have we found out yet the name of that?
I was trying, but our internet is fucked right now, and I've just given up. It wasn't Zarko the Tomorrow Man involved with that, though, was it?
He was in it to help humanity.
Okay.
He was in that story that because Thor becomes that despot, and Zarko is trying to help out. It's one of those alternate timeline deals where he changes. He's not the bad guy, and
How did it all resolve?
He ended
was it
up-
one of those deals where it's cool, and then it sort of like peters out, and that's why the conclusion isn't really coming readily? Because I know sometimes you'll have like
No,
a great
it's 'cause,
premise, and then it doesn't really end, and it just sort of stops.
I'm old and I can't remember a lot of shit
There's
very
that
good.
too. There's that too.
It literally has been about 15 years since that story came out.
Yeah, but it wouldn't matter if I read it yesterday. It'd be the same thing. My brain's mush.
Yeah, but what Mister Fixit is talking about is one of my great frustrations. Is I'll have read the story the first time, and then somebody comes in and does a second, everybody's fucking raving about it. Oh, it's so great! I'm like, it's a fucking rip-off story, man. What the fuck ever? But sometimes it is done better the second time around, though.
Well, when I told him, it blew my mind kind of. I know that they rip off, every story is ripped off from something, but you usually see that different book to different book. Or if they're going to redo it, like say, just take Superman, for example, they'll pull something that happened in the 60s and change it up and spice it up and, man, wow, this is cool. But they took that idea from way back then. This idea, 15 years, that's not that long. I mean, that's in the modern age of comics.
But still 15 years ago. And honestly, I'm not inclined to think that Aaron probably read the Jan Jurgens run. I've done that before myself where I'm like, well, surely they read that. And that's where they got the idea from. Not necessarily. Sometimes you're just sitting there brainstorming and you just come up with the same idea that somebody else came up with. I would be more interested to see how the execution compares. You know, just having the same premise isn't enough. If he executed in a different fashion, then that would be important. I think there's really a good case for parallel thinking because I just can't imagine Aaron sitting there going, let me read through this fucking Dan Jurgens run and get some ideas.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking, okay, if you want to do something to spice things up in
then
Thor, then you're like, what else could you do? What about older
But how
gods? What about
this,
like
though, then?
Cthulhu and shit?
But he's got a fucking editor. Usually the editor.
These editors fucking don't give a
You don't
shit
think
anymore.
Okay, well here, I'll let you.
Okay.
Get on your
Get
soapbox.
in your soapbox. Let's hear it.
Back in the old days, especially at a company like Marvel, which kind of invented what we know of as modern continuity, because before that you would just write a fucking story. And in fact, DC writers in the 50s especially, but going into the 60s, they would literally like write a story and they'd rewrite the same story like 3 to 5 years later because they figured the kids would have grown out of it. And so they just would just redo it, you know, they completely rip themselves off. Usually the same creative team, in fact. So in the early days of Marvel, everybody loved the Marvel comics. They were only fucking 12 cents or whatever the fuck. So everybody read all of Marvel comics, so everybody knew the continuity, including the people who were working on the book. So up until at least the 1970s, early 80s, it was actually the writer's responsibility to keep up with the continuity. They're the one writing the story, so they have to know what the fuck's happening. At some point in the 90s, when editors decided they were going to take control of everything and they were going to be running the show, they became the shepherds of continuity, and they were the ones who, it was their responsibility to keep track of what all happened. So in the case of Jerry Conway, when he came back, he was surprised to find that I think it was Jerry Conway, maybe Steve Englehart, he was surprised to find out that it was the editor's job, and he's thinking he's going to have to do all this research to catch up, and the editor's like, no, don't
How
worry.
do you know all this shit? Seriously, how do you know these people? I've never heard of these people in
You don't
my
know
life.
Jerry Conway?
This is getting
Frank.
This is getting Frank, not whatever the fuck you were trying to say.
was the tip.
He coined the term. I guess he can decide whatever the fuck it means.
No, he's
Seriously though, how?
I listened to interviews with these guys, for instance, or I've read interviews with these guys. So, and I learned at an early age. Honestly, and it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned John and
Did you
Mitta.
know all this shit like 10 years ago
Oh,
before
yeah.
the internet was
Oh,
really
sure.
hot?
Oh, yeah,
But
definitely.
he's a ferocious
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm a ferocious fan. It's funny because we've been talking about John Romita Jr.
I used to be ferocious.
And I can tell you exactly, you're still ferocious. It's just directed in different fashion. You were talking about John Romita Jr. earlier. And what happened is I was reading Uncanny X-Men, and then at some point after around 210 or so, I noticed I just wasn't enjoying the book as much. I just wasn't as into it. And I couldn't quite put my finger on what is it? What's the problem? And you mentioned Bob Vycek, the guy who was inking John Romita Jr. on Iron Man. And I remember reading a blurb where they're like, our inker, Bob Vycek, coming back next month. And I'm like, oh, maybe that's it. Maybe it was the inker. I don't really know what these guys do. I don't really understand this. I'll just wait and see. So Bob Vycek was back the next month, and I think it was probably like one of the first months that Mark Silvestri was the artist. And it's like, no, that wasn't fucking it, because that guy does not look anything like what happened. And I finally realized, well, the art's different. And around the same time, you had the Starbrand book on the stands, and that's drawn to look like the way X-Men used to look. Because I was a fan of John Romita Jr. It was one of the reasons why I was buying the book. And I didn't buy Starbrand because I never really got into the new universe when it was coming out. I actually bought them as quarter bin fodder a few years later when they were dying out.
Is Starbrand, no, he's in the comics now, but was he always part of Marvel?
I don't want to even open the new universe door. That's a whole other episode. What I will say is when they were created, the new universe was completely separate from the Marvel universe.
It was going to be like Vertigo.
Yeah, not even Vertigo, because Vertigo is still connected to DC to some fashion.
Would have been like Malibu, kind of.
A while back we did the Shadow Line episode.
Good episode.
The Dr. Zero episode where we talked about the Shadow Line. The Shadow Line, of course, had fucking nothing to do with the Marvel universe. It was completely separate. It was going to be them doing before the Vertigo existed, it was them doing Vertigo style superheroes, them doing Alan Moore style superheroes, completely divorced from the Marvel universe entirely. The new universe was supposed to be that as well. But then the line failed, and Mark Gruenwald, being one of these guys that just can't let anything go continuity-wise, brought the whole new universe back into the Marvel universe via a crossover event in Quasar, Starburst, which you may not remember crossover. I think it was called Starburst, something like that.
Oh, it was Skittles.
Yeah, exactly. Taste of Rainbow. And Quasar actually got the Star brand and was having to deal with that.
I just got that.
Yeah. And so there was a whole crossover about the new universe kind of getting into the Marvel universe for a little while. And then every now and again they revisited it over the years, and now Jonathan Hickman, when he was doing all that incursion stuff in the Avengers books, he completely brought the new universe into the Marvel universe at this point. But it was intended to be completely separate.
Okay.
But anyhow, what I realized is one of the things I loved about X-Men was the design aesthetic and the artist was gone, and that's what spurred me to start paying attention. Well, like, if the guy that was making me like this book isn't around anymore, I need to follow that guy, because that's what I was enjoying, not necessarily these characters. Because I bought X-Men for years after he left, and I tried to appreciate Mark Silvestri, and I really did appreciate Jim Lee and guys like that when they came on. But it just wasn't the same for me. That's why I started paying attention to who the creators were. And it just kind of spiraled from there. And I was poor. So I read the entire book. I read the letters pages. I read the fucking advertisements. I read the indicias, everything. And over time, that stuff started to stick. You'd hear certain creator voices and how they would respond to the fans, and they'd bring up, well, this guy's doing this and that guy's doing that. And it just kind of went from there. But I've got books on this bookshelf behind me.
Did you ever win a no prize?
No, I didn't ever write. I wasn't a big letter hack. I wrote maybe 4 or 5 letters in my entire life as a comic book fan.
What the fuck was a no prize? Like,
what would happen is you would have to write Marvel and tell them a way out of a problem they had. Basically, they would have screwed up their own continuity, and so it was up to the readers to write in a letter explaining what they did wrong and how to fix it. You wasn't enough just to point out the problem. They wanted you to patch the problem as well. Stan Lee especially liked doing that, because that way he didn't have to come up with an explanation. He let the readers do that.
He's another horrible person.
And then he could also pretend it was intentional too, I bet.
Sometimes, yeah. So anyway, what he would do is, if you won a no prize, he would acknowledge your correction in the letters page, and they would send you an envelope that was Marvel stationery and would have pictures of the characters and stuff, have a stamp on it, but there wasn't actually anything inside the envelope. So your no prize was literally, you got no prize. They just gave you the envelope showing that you got from Marvel. Yeah.
You were a smart ass, basically.
Yeah, basically, they're being a smart ass. Yeah. Yeah, so it just came from that, and I've read books and read magazines, and I'm just a sponge for all this shit.
Basically, what he's trying to say is,
Frank really hard.
What he's trying to say is his life was so shitty, he would immerse himself in a fantasy world.
It's true. It
So
literally
now
is
Jerry
true.
Conway's his friend because he doesn't have any real friends in real life.
Hey,
Captain America's his father because he didn't have a father growing up.
Actually, I unfollowed him on Twitter because he spoiled, I think, a Game of Thrones episode on me. It's like,
Jerry Conway?
You're
Yeah.
off my
I
list,
think I
buddy.
remember that.
Yeah.
There's my
But I love Jerry Conway. Great writer, by the way. He was the co-creator of Punisher, for instance. So that's definitely something memorable for him. He created Firestorm over at DC. So
Just so you know, when we were at Mike Zeck's booth, and the guy was pushing the creator of the Black
Suit Spider-Man.
Yeah, we learned it because of this. He starts franking you, and so that's why when we were talking about it earlier,
Mike Zeck handler was trying to hype all of
Renee Zellweger. Renee Witterstadt.
That guy was not Renee Zellweger. But he was like Mike Zeck. He's the creator of the and designer of the Spider-Man's black costume. I'm like,
And then Matt goes, I have a story. And
Jim
that's what-
Shooter paid, what was it, $500 or whatever for that, or was it $50?
That's what I've heard. I think
They didn't.
I think what it was is
because he kept the letter.
Jim Shooter's a wheeler and dealer, man. He's been around.
Yes. There's a lot of
But anyway,
conflicting stories.
he was the
related to
first
him.
one to draw the black costume Spider-Man in the comics.
Well,
he
not
did
just
not
that.
design it.
My
sir.
understanding. Well, hold on. My understanding is that the idea was sent in by a reader, but that Zach altered the design. He kind of tweaked it some, and that's what he's taking credit for. The story I've heard was what you heard, and so it seems like a bit of an
Because
overreach.
the dude has his letter framed. It's scanned online. You can read the letter that Jim Shooter sent
Yeah.
him and said, "Hey, thank you for these designs, Pally."
I do think it's a bit of a reach. Yeah. I mean, I adore Mike Zeck. I love his work.
It's simpler to just say Mike Zeck. He said he was the first one to draw it, and I was like, "Oh, that's accurate." And then he said he designed it. And I was like,
And
Yeah.
the real question is, would Stan Lee take credit for it?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. It's his creation. He owns it.
Is it Reeves?
He created the color black.
Yes.
"Here's what happened. I was
No,
almost,
that's Bob.
Here's
Bob
what happened.
Kane claims
He
credit for creating the
was
color black.
the first white man.
Here's what happened. I saw a kid on the street, and I said, "Hey, you know, it'd be a great idea for Spider-Man if he were all black. I want you to write a letter and send it to Jim Shooter." Ta-da! I came up with the idea.
I'm trying to remember how I got down with this in the first place. I'm trying to remember how we got to this point.
Also, when you
yeah.
usually you just kind of climb
Yeah,
on
kind
there and go.
of. I go into a fuge state.
Sounds
Yeah.
like-
So anyway, so the
Oh, yeah,
editors
yeah.
took over the responsibility of continuity.
I
They were the
interrupted you on
guardians.
editors.
No, it's fine.
No,
And
that's where we were. Go ahead.
we do this all the fucking time. It ain't a thing. As the industry's gone further and further in decline, as less and less money gets filtered to anybody working for these companies anymore, especially the editors, it's all fallen by the wayside. Nobody keeps up with continuity really anymore, except the fans who are bitching on a message board and into the abyss, especially because then Tom Brewer will show up and talk snidely to them and tell them they're fucking idiots in a really passive aggressive way and say, no, we've got all that fixed. Don't worry about it. And then never actually fix a goddamn thing. So.
One thing you have to realize too, though, 15 years is a fucking long ass time. It seems like a shorter time than it used to, but really, when you think about it, when you're reading comics in like when you were reading comics in the mid 70s, when you think 15 years before that, there were no superhero comic books. You know what I mean? Like the Fantastic Four 15 years before 1975 hadn't been invented yet. So 15 years is quite a bit longer.
I
You know
think
what I mean?
you're right. I'm thinking of 15 years because I'm older, that
Right.
it's not that long. When really a decade and
So-
a half, that's, that's a whole nother
you're
generation.
reading, like say you were reading comics, 20 years ago was what, 97? Comics for me in 1997 don't seem like it was that long ago. That's as far removed as Frank Miller was writing Dark Knight Returns as 1986? 1966 was
Yeah.
20 years before that. And you
Yeah.
think 1966 is fucking a long ass time ago. You're only 20 years removed from it.
You're right.
And also,
I came to this realization one time when there was some article about kids. It was 1 year, and they wanted to write about what do you think life's going to be like in the year 2000. And they were like, the date that article was written was further away from that video than that video was from the year 2000. The way you understand time nowadays, because you can just access shit from that long ago so easily, it's just really bizarre.
and then you got to remember too, it's a medium where they have to constantly reinvent themselves and keep things interesting. Which to me, I always hate when people are like, well, why do they do this to the characters? Sometimes it makes sense, but I sat there because I was going through my collection this past couple weeks, cleaning it up, and I was like, man, it must be really hard to come up with an original idea because you have so much history, and not just history with your company, like Marvel, but in DC did a story similar. So then you got to worry about that. And in Image, because now you can actually consider Image being out for quite a while. I mean, Image came out when we were young, so anyone who picks up an Image book now, it's like, it's new to them, but to us, they've been around,
Yeah.
what?
25,
Yeah.
you're right.
So I sat down, I'm thinking, so each time they write
so-
these books, it's harder to reinvent an original story. So then I get now why they do some of this outlandish shit. I'd be like, I've read it, and you're gonna lose my interest. So to a newer reader, it's like, oh wow, I've never read this before. So they have to please two different mindsets. The mindset who hasn't been submerged in this universe, and someone who's been there for so long that it's almost like The Watcher. I've seen it all. And so what do you got new for me? Because I'm kind of bored right now.
Yeah, Hail Hydra. Yeah, exactly.
That works for me.
Captain America's Hail Hydra that everybody loves.
I love it. I want that on a t-shirt, dude.
All the crazy outrage over that, and we're like, Captain America's been doing crazy shit like that for fucking decades.
Well, Frank kind of got me. We were talking about, he's saying that Cap should be gay, and I was kind of weird about it. Then I started actually reading some of the stuff, and I was like, I can see it now. I actually could see it. Like, somebody had put up all these different issues and characters and stuff, and I was like, wow, he's actually kind of fallen in that direction for quite a while. Like, you're right, he was very uncomfortable around women, and I never noticed that. And see, my thing is...
wait,
Why can't
are
that
gay
be
people
played
uncomfortable uncomfortable around women?
Yeah, why can't they be?
Well, no, but Cap wouldn't.
Straight people are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
No, but
I mean-
Cap would not interact with them.
In intimate circumstances, not in general, but when like a woman would be coming on to him, and instead of getting frisky with her like a dude would do, he'd be kind of like, I don't know, I've got to go do my duty. And that kind of
Remember
bullshit.
his roots, though. I mean, he was a scrawny little nothing. His self-esteem probably wasn't high.
Wait, so let me get back to my point. I distinctly remember the beginning of Image, right? But how long has Image been around?
93.
So 93 to today.
I would say even before that.
Well, what gets me, it's like, I remember being at a grocery store and seeing coloring books that were celebrating the 25th anniversary of Star Trek. And then I'm walking around a convention floor today and people are wearing the 50th anniversary of Star Trek t-shirts. And it makes you very aware of how much time has passed. But you also, like I was complaining about how, oh, well, the editors don't keep up with all this continuity. Well, you're keeping up with continuity that started around 1962. And now it's 2016. So how many fucking decades worth of stories, especially during the boom years.
That's what I'm saying. So to put it in perspective, so
Plus, they're paying attention to the 40s stuff now, which they didn't really pay any attention to back in the 70s, really, except for Invaders, except for Roy Thomas. So there's just so fucking much. I think really what they expect you to do is go and look on the resources online. And if it's not something that's directly related to one of those resources and shit from like 2002, oddly enough, you're less likely to find that stuff than something from 1966. Because a lot of times they're going kind of chronologically, filling in all those gaps as far as these internet databases go. And so there's a real good chance that that's a lost period in terms of internet resources right now, that we'd never even know that story was around.
Let's get back to Thor for a second and the whole Jason Aaron not knowing or knowing. If you read both stories, and the Thor story with Jurgens takes up 5 graphic novels. One is called Spiral. Another is, I think, Gods on Earth. So people look for those if you want to read them. But that part of the story is so similar. I have to think that Jason Aaron did know about it and said, hey, I want to revamp it. I just don't think you come up with that same idea in the same book.
okay, so I got a question. Let's start talking about Thor comics, because nobody cares about Thor comics. What do you think about the Marvel Cinematic Universe Thor and his movies and contributions to the franchise?
I like the first one.
Okay,
I
didn't actually address it at all.
No, man, let's throw it all
Oh,
in.
but we're doing the Thor. It's a Thor pie. I feel like
It's a Thor down.
I feel like we've done nothing.
Anything Thor
stop,
can go.
no. You introduced this as the Thor podcast, so I imagine you should cut 99% of what we've actually talked about so far.
We wouldn't have enough to talk about if we said, hey, we're just going to talk about the Thor movie, or how did you put it? The Thor
Representation,
cinematic. Yeah, there's really not a lot to tell.
I mean, like, yeah, do you like how he's being
I
represented?
do like him. I didn't enjoy the first movie a whole lot. I did like the second one. I thought the second one got more into Asgard. Loki definitely brings the movie up a couple notches.
I think that's pretty universal that Loki keeps stealing his movies.
Yeah,
Right.
but I mean, and that's how he was written that way for a long time too, I think.
In the comics,
Yeah,
he did, right?
Well, he's written as this one-dimensional, strong, tough Viking.
Who says verily?
Yeah. I mean,
Well, see, and that's the thing. It feels to me like they've rediscovered his being a Viking only in recent years. It seems like he spent a lot of his history just being generic god dude who hits shit with his hammer. Like, actually being specific to Vikings, they're in the seas, they're fucking brutal, and they're doing invasions and all that kind of shit. They really didn't do a lot of that, it seemed like, in the comics for most of the run of Thor.
Simonson did have some good stuff when Thor was with the Warriors 3, and they were going through different godly lands. They came across Lear, Lord of Lightning, and that's when Thor was wearing his battle armor.
Love it.
It was cool.
Battle armor, dope as hell.
So those were some good stories, and they had a folklorish hint to them. But yeah, you're right. Thor as thunder god, you think of him now, and he's much more the force that you think, but he's still who he is. He's the muscle dude who's got a hammer. He's gonna whack you with it.
If you're my Thor salesman, I'm not buying Thor from you. So you're really going to have to work on your spiel.
okay.
Why? Okay, as three dudes who have a Marvel podcast and have some of familiarity with Thor, but have never really committed to reading these books for any length of time, why the fuck should we read Thor comics?
Okay, but here's the thing. You guys said I'm your Thor guy. I've read a lot of Thor, but I've only liked 4 or 5 big chunks of it. I mean, it's not.
Whoa. But see, no, you can't nod at that shit, because let's face it, Captain America's comics are the same fucking way, and you're a huge
No,
Captain
I'm
America.
agreeing with him. That's right. I call myself a Wonder Woman fan. I like about 3 to 5 periods of Wonder Woman comics, and the rest of it I have no use
Iron Man's the
for.
same
Cap,
way.
I've got my handful of runs. Cap is my favorite superhero to never fucking read. I've gone years without reading Captain Nightmare comics, and when I have read them, I often fucking hate them, even the ones everybody else likes.
Well, and for
so I just have my cherry run. So I'm nodding not to say, oh, you know, like Thor sucks because you only like 3 runs. I'm nodding because it's like you can love the essence of the character, you can love the iconography of the character, and be a fan without actually enjoying a lot of the stuff they produce. Because a lot of what they produce really isn't that great.
Well, like
or there's a lot of fucking journeyman shit where they're just going for years and years. Yeah, I love the Martian Manhunter, and how many stories can I really recommend to somebody who isn't already invested in that character?
0. I think you rip on every fucking thing.
Nah, fuck you. There's so like we're going to do American Secrets at some point. That's an easy one for me right there.
Yeah, a lot of people say, "Wow," and that's his favorite character in Marvel Universe.
And
but
you
yeah,
say
it's
verily.
It's verily. Yeah.
I know one Thor story.
A lot of
I
his
know
stuff
one
is,
Thor
a
run.
lot of the stuff written has been shit. I mean, I didn't enjoy it, but
Well, that's not
but
the
the
road I'm trying
stuff
to take
I
down, though.
But I
the,
can say-
the stuff I did enjoy, I really enjoy.
And see, that's what I'm trying to get to. Who is Thor to you? What is it about that character you find appealing? Explain to me why Thor is cool and why you like those stories you do like with the character.
Because knowing that something is based off of your heritage gives you a link to it. That's part of it.
That's like with me and Iron Man, affluent white man.
nice.
Who's an alcoholic.
And I look at him and I go, you know what? I can have a credit score like that.
Wait, I got one question. Does DC have a version of Thor?
The thing about public domain is anybody who wants to have a version of Thor can have a version of Thor so long as it isn't too similar to Marvel's. And since Marvel's version really isn't very true, I mean, that's one of the things that people loved about the Walt Simonson run, from my understanding, is that he was one of the first guys to actually mine North mythology.
He was the closest.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it's different. Odin in Thor mythology is very much a trickster. Where you think it's just Loki who is like that. Well, Odin's like that, too. A lot of the stories, Thor doesn't run around pounding people with a hammer. I can try to find the book I got, but yeah, they're totally different.
So what was DC's
But I mean, just as a for instance, you know, Rob Liefeld had his own Thor.
I was just going to
And,
say
yeah.
that. I was going to say, hey, that
And he was-
fucking Levi's wearing motherfucker had his Thor, and he was
Oh, you
he got his
present?
ass whooped by Supreme.
No, I thought it went the other way. I thought that Thor was running around, or was it the Thor was running around kicking ass all over the Extreme Universe, or was it that Supreme had gone nuts and Thor was one of the guys
Supreme
they
went
threw at him?
nuts and took Thor's hammer away from him.
Okay, I read
And it
Supreme years ago, but I can't
It
remember it,
was
very
a
well.
Liefeld drawn hammer, so it had fucking holsters on it.
No, I guarantee you, it was one of the guys who was in the studio who drew like him. They
It had
know
like 3 AK-47 clips on it.
Big ass banana clip.
So wait, so then what is DC's version of Thor?
Well, I'm just
Is
wondering.
it Thor or like is it?
How does a hammer
don't-
have
you know,
crotch
I don't-
wrinkles? That's what I'm wondering about. But Thor actually, the only place I remember Thor turning up, besides like bullshit like War of the Gods, where they
They've
just
had
use them as a
Samson,
one-off.
and they've had
Samson-
Superman has mined a little of the
Yeah, well, the Thor I remember from DC actually is in Vertigo. He was in Sandman, in one of the key arcs of that series, Season of Mists. They had their version of Thor turn up. The Norse gods were trying to petition to get the key to hell that was in Morpheus' possession at the time. Thor was part of the contingent for the Norse gods, but it was a very different Thor. He was drawn by Kelly Jones. He had ridiculous proportions. He was kind of an
Kelly
idiot.
Jones is ridiculous.
Yeah, he really
All
is.
you had to say was Kelly Jones. You don't think Kelly Jones and ridiculous proportions.
Yeah, and the hammer, you know, it was probably the smallest thing on the guy's body. Everybody can do their own version of Thor. It's just that Marvel's is so distinctive, and it's not really true to the legends. But that's what people think about when they think about Thor anyway, because that's what Thor is in popular culture, really. So they've even made Thor movies. I don't know if you realize this, but like Asylum went and made a bunch of Thor movies around the time the Marvel movies were coming out.
I saw those. I was gonna run
That
some,
happens.
and I'm like,
Every time there's a new Hercules movie or cartoon, there are about 1 billion other bootleg Hercules cartoons
Yeah.
that come out, and you see him playing it like your local grocery store where they're selling the DVDs for $3.99 or whatever.
You were in the midst of selling us on Thor, though.
He says, "Verily."
Yeah, that was a good one. It's one of the reasons why I
Yeah,
like
I
it.
don't even know if he's been saying that lately.
Well,
See,
fuck me.
I make more money for buying comics because now my kids are a little bit older. I don't have to dump it all toward them, and I don't buy Thor right now. So yeah, I am probably the worst person.
No, but I think that's what we were saying. That there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I stopped reading when Thor went to She-Thor, and that run ended, and then I stopped.
Me and you were
Wait, hasn't it? I thought Jane Foster was still Thor.
me and Fixit kind of read the same thing.
Yeah.
because
Because he buys it and I borrow it, pretty much.
I buy it and then send him the
Fix
code.
it the Mucha. Yeah.
So yeah, so when I quit something, he has to quit too.
Hey, you know what? I thought I think I quit that book around the same time as you.
It wasn't going anywhere though, or it was just not.
Well, no, I finished reading it. Like, thank God for the public library because they had it. When I finished reading the run because I didn't want to end the run. Yeah, like that's it. And then Marvel was going through that whole change up with the what is it?
No.
Doom taking over and
Secret Wars.
Yeah. Which Fryhole can admit it's pretty good.
The main book was just all right, but there's certain of the they've been hit or miss.
Yeah.
But,
I just
but
like
the
the
ones
Thor's-
that hit, they hit nice. That
Really?
was another good story to me was the Battle World Thor's book, because you would think it would be some big show of force with all these Thors. It was like a detective tale, but with Thors. And that sounds stupid as shit, and maybe maybe it is, but I liked it. So
No, you can get interesting things from genre mashup.
I enjoyed it.
Wait. So I'm confused. Who was the frog Thor in that thing? 'Cause I saw him hopping around. Is that real? Did that really happen in the Thor books?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thor got changed into a frog by the Enchantress.
Holy shit. I sat there when I was reading, I'm like, why is this little frog jumping around with a hammer? And I was like, okay, I'll just ask Fryhole next time when I see him.
Very famous cover.
Wasn't that like a 2-issue run or something in the 80s?
It was longer than 2 issues.
Oh,
I just
'cause
remember I didn't like it.
Because here's the thing, I've talked about how I didn't read Thor, but that was on the newsstand when I was a kid. For some reason, I just couldn't bring myself to buy Thor. I couldn't find the core character interesting, but I always flipped through it because they were always doing really weird shit in Thor. And one of it was the Toad of Thunder. He becomes a frog, but he still has the Mjolnir, and so he's running around with fucking Mjolnir as a frog, and
he's
it's
got
like,
the
this
helmet
is
too, doesn't
kind of cool.
Yeah, I had the helmet too.
I think it's a flaw in my own character that I didn't buy those books as a kid. But one thing I did get though is I bought one of those 3-packs that had a Thor comic in it. And I think it was the one, it was part of Marvel's 25th anniversary celebration where they had the headshot surrounded by the cool border.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
And if I remember, I think it was that issue, and it was a Walt Simonson story, but it was drawn by Sal Buscema, if I remember correctly. Might have been John, but I think it was Sal. It takes place in the Old West. And basically you got this old gunslinger in blue and white, if I remember correctly, and he's in this frontier town, and he's waiting for the train to come. And when the train comes, it's Loki, and he's really fucking aged, the gunslinger's aged, and they're all trying to get a hold of these apples that the Asgardians have to eat every now and again to restore their immortality. So they're all fucking elderly in this western town, and so Thor's a gunslinger trying to essentially, I think he's trying to rob the train to get the golden apples to become proper young Thor again, and Loki and these demons that are running the train are trying to stop him. And that was fascinating to me because that was nothing like what I thought a Thor story was supposed to be.
Wow, that is weird.
But it was great, and I read that comic and I enjoyed that comic, and then once again I never fucking bought another Thor until fucking X-Men Mutant Massacre gets involved with it, which makes no damn sense. And again, I think it's just a flaw in my own character that Thor can get into these places, these intriguing twists, especially during the Walt Simonson run, because you've got this horse-headed alien who becomes a Thor by picking up the hammer, because it's a natural conceit. You pick up this stick and you pound it to the ground, and you're the new Thor, and you're imbued with the essence of who Thor is, this Viking warrior god. And it doesn't matter if you're a frog or an Old West gunslinger or a horse-headed alien, you're fucking Thor, and you have responsibilities and you have abilities, but you also have your own agenda because you're still yourself at the same time you're also Thor. And so it's sort of like a Green Lantern ring for the Marvel Universe where you can go off into all kinds of crazy Alan Moore-ish directions if you want to.
But
it seems like Walt Simonson, right, you do have to be worthy, which is also interesting because it's not just a matter of getting the ring. Although, let's be honest, you have to be worthy to have a Green Lantern ring usually too. But you have to have certain special qualities in order to be Thor. So you've already kind of been validated as being an appropriate choice just by your ability to wield the hammer once it comes into existence. You can actually go into crazy tangents, but it seems like Walt Simonson was only one of the only guys that ever figured out to do that and keep the book really interesting. And it doesn't seem like anybody's even really tried it since, with the exception of the Jane Foster gender swap. So the most interesting thing for me about Thor is the one thing that nobody's ever done anything with since Walt Simonson left, for the most part. Except, I mean, because they had like Eric Masterson and shit. But that's not the same thing because he's just another white dude with blonde hair. Because once they abandoned the Donald Blake conceit, because then they revealed that Donald Blake wasn't a real person. It was just an invention of Odin to, humble Thor. Yes. So once they abandoned that, he was Thor all the time. He had some bullshit, more Norwegian type name. What was his, Sigurd Jarlson or something?
Sven Jarlson.
Sven Jarlson, yeah. So, yeah, seriously.
I was just making a joke.
And he was working as a construction worker, if I remember correctly, and he had the beard and ponytail and stuff. And then when they have Eric Masterson, he was basically the exact same thing, with the exception that now you've got more of a bro-y kind of dude that's supposed to be more set for the 90s. Yeah. So that wasn't enough of a change to really make it fascinating. When you have a frog of thunder, that's fascinating. When you're just another guy who kind of looked like Thor anyway, it's not that big of a deal.
Another good Thor read.
I kind of want to read that Apple story now. That sounded kind of cool.
Avengers Disassembled Thor. Was good, yeah.
Ragnarok.
Yeah.
It was really fucking hard.
Yeah, very dark.
Didn't he like line Thor and shit?
Thor had to rip out, because Odin sacrificed one of his eyes. They demanded a bigger sacrifice from Thor, and he had to rip out both his eyes, and it wasn't.
Sounds dope.
No, it was cool, man. People were dying. Like,
Avengers disassembled when they decided to create the new Avengers
the
with
Dark Avengers.
yeah,
and
with
at
Brian.
the time, that was it for Asgard. It was supposed.
Yeah, they ended the Thor series for a while there because
Thor
that's
and
what was
everybody.
screwing me up is that's how the Jurgen series ended with Michael A. Von Oven coming in and writing that last like 4-issue arc and wrapping up the run. So yeah, like you say, fucking Thor rips out his eyes. And I think by the end,
He
like
said he's
they're-
never read like any Thor shit. They can listen to this shit.
But I ran comic shops all those years, so I was flipping through every goddamn thing that came through there for 8 years straight. So
It was awesome. Thor's hammer had busted. Ulik and Fenris, and they had gotten hold of the old cast that made Mjolnir, and they made lesser versions of
You
it.
guys have got to be making this sound way cooler than it actually
I
was.
know,
'Cause this
dude,
sounds
it's-
really freaking rad, and there's no
No,
way. it's
it
this
was
rad.
cool. And eventually Thor has to go to Surtur to have him reforge his hammer.
Shout out Surtur. Always looked awesome.
And he's like, Surtur's like, why should I do it? And he's like, because we'll have the biggest fucking battle that we've ever had. We'll have Ragnarok. And so he fucking forges his enemy his hammer so that they can.
Okay, now I gotta read this shit
It's
too.
fucking
Like,
cool, dude.
Thor's comic coming up in stock.
it's only like 4-ish, but they were trying to wipe like clean everything out and
Yep.
give everybody a fresh start. And the Thor series ended entirely for a long period of time until Straczynski brought him back. And then Captain America's that was how the Marvel Knight series ended. Is Robert Kirkman wrote the last 4 issues, which was like Cap and Diamondback versus like fucking everybody, ending with like Red Skull and power armor and shit. So Kirkman got to have, and I love that story. I thought it was a really fun. It's like when Mark Waid came and took over from Mark Gruenwald, they were trying to take the stink off book. It's like Gruenwald had been around for too long,
Yeah.
and they'd killed him off at the end of the Gruenwald run. So you had this one issue where all the Avengers in their shitty 90s suit got together and said, wow, Cap was swell for an entire issue. And they just fucking dropped that whole storyline because they revealed at the end that Red Skull had Cap and was giving him blood infusions because Red Skull had the super soldier serum in himself. He'd stolen it from Cap at one point during the Grunwald run. And so he was reinvigorating Cap through his own blood because he needed him to fight Adolf Hitler, who now had a cosmic cube.
This is Kirkman's run?
This was Mark Waid.
This is Mark Waid's run. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the
This
thing
was
with
before
Mark,
The Man Without a Country.
this is the Man Without.
That was
Or no,
the Man Without-
Man Without a Country was the second arc.
That's what I'm saying. That was
Yeah.
just before.
Right. The lead into like 450 or
Yeah,
whatever.
I remember this. I collected
Yeah,
that
it's just
stuff. I
like,
got
you
a
know.
little bit up there. So
So anyway, so when Mark Waid came on, there was
Is this after Captain America Ice with Ron Lim and
Oh, way after. You're talking,
Way
yeah,
after,
this was,
okay.
because by the time Grunwald was done, he was working with Dave Hoover.
Yeah.
You know, so Ron Lim was like several artists prior to that as far as runs go.
Did you ever read that run? The whole ice?
Nah, I like the look of Ron Lim's Captain America. It looked nice, but at that time, it was the early 90s. Cap was not a priority for me at that point in time. And
fought
also,
Dare-
and
he fought
Grunwald had kind
Daredevil.
of, oh no, that's Streets of Poison. That one I
Streets of
remember.
Poison.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
yeah,
talking about.
where he gets the super coke and it fucks his brain up. Yeah, that one I did read.
That had one of the coolest villains.
again, you're making this shit sound way cooler.
Yeah, I don't
Had
think it
one of
was.
It had one of the coolest villains of all time. He like didn't have no powers or anything. Cap goes into this big factory full of ice, which is like the super crack.
Right.
And there's this dude in there with a lighter, and Cap's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "Oh, my name is Napalm because of this trick, but I can only do it once." And then he clicks the lighter, and the whole fucking thing blows up. And I just remember, as a kid, I was like, "Dude, it's fucking."
Metal.
That's how you go out. I was like, "That is cool."
I got a
as
superpower. I can only
shit.
use it one time. Boom.
So yeah, then Cap goes around town all fucking coked out.
Yeah, because he's in the midst of the factory when it
Yeah,
blows up, so
man.
he inhaled all that shit.
He got hot
and beats the
boxed
fuck
in
out of
it? Yeah.
Daredevil while he's high.
Fucking Daredevil is trying to like, hey man, you need to back down. He's like, no, I need to whoop your ass, and he fucking whooped their ass.
Nah, he's like, nah, man, I'm good. I'm good. Let's go.
I had 2 more coke so I can work harder, so I can be a better superhero.
So I can beat up more Daredevils.
It was funny. He had the costume on, but he started growing a beard, like he was all like disheveled. So like the beard just kept getting a little bit longer because he just still had the.
Did he actually like draw the mask with little pointy things like a Simpsons character or something?
It was just like, oh yeah, it probably stinks, dude. You've been in that costume for a few weeks, all coked out, pissing himself.
Somebody hose Steve down, for God's sake.
And y'all complain about Hell Hydra, dude? Cap was a coke addict, dude. That's worse.
Well, but a lot of people.
Not even coke.
Super coke.
It was like ice, which was like
Meth.
it was
Meth
supposed to
before
be
they
like
called it meth.
mixed with crack, so it wasn't expensive. No, because it was like they were showing all the junkies buying it. So no,
So Cap wasn't even on the good shit.
No, he
That's pretty sad.
Cap was no Whitney Houston in Streets of Poison.
No, I think he was a little too Whitney Houston from the sound of it.
Oh, wow.
Whitney
He asked
Houston
Daredevil to burst his butt
is
bubble, and that's where it all got
too
started.
rich to smoke crack.
She did say that.
Yeah.
Did say that.
She was lying through her cracked up fucking teeth, too, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I hope Bobby doesn't
Who
hear this.
still would have banged her though? I still would have hit that. And
Wrong. We're all wrong.
I don't care.
So anyway, getting back to it though. So when Mark Waid came on to Captain America, there was this real sense of, okay, we're just going to let this Mark Gruenwald shit go by the wayside, and I'm going to go reference some 70s shit by bringing back Sharon Carter and stuff. What I liked about Robert Kirkman's run is you could tell that motherfucker read the exact same fucking stories you were talking about. You could tell he'd read all that Gruenwald shit, because in 4 issues he did nothing but just slam you with all I mean, Diamondback all of a sudden is his girlfriend again, you know? That's how fucking deep into the Gruenwald he was wanting to go. And so it was really nice to see like a grand conclusion, and it felt to me like a tribute to the entire Gruenwald run in those last 4 issues of the Marvel Knights series. Plus, before that,
Is she still alive? Is Diamondback
I think she's still around out there somewhere. Yeah,
Wasn't she an addict too?
I don't remember that. Maybe, but I don't remember that.
Kind of sounds familiar.
Her name's Diamondback.
Dude, that would have been fucking awesome. Like showing her and Cap like junking up on the horse in some old shitty motel.
She's out there picking ditchweed. In the
I'm trying to picture Cap like setting up lines with the shield.
No, man, they got a shield and a lighter underneath it.
fucking boiling up a big old thing.
It's like a
of
Colonial Marine flamethrower up under the shield, and they're all just breathing it in.
Nice.
Communal. So anyway, so that's what Robert Kirkman
Don't do
did.
drugs, kids.
Don't do drugs.
Do not do drugs.
Unless it's Superman.
Especially with Captain America.
Get high on comics.
Except if you do drugs, you will look like Captain America, since that's how he
Super
came
soldier
along.
serum.
His super
Everything
soldier.
special about you came out of a bottle. We've been over it many a time. So that's how Cap's Marvel Knights run ended. Thor ended for several years after that. Give him a chance to kind of
I gotta
come
tell you,
back.
I'm gonna read Marvel Knights Captain America.
I know, I wanna
This
find
is
it now.
cool shit.
It's fun. It is fun, but I think the Thor story sounds cooler than the Cap one. What was great about the Cap one is it just felt like a nice tribute to Gruenwald,
And
it was fun.
that was the Avengers disassembled.
Yeah,
too?
it just again, it was like 4 issues or so. Scott Eaton drew it. It was a good looking book too. Scott Eaton, I wish he'd done a Cap run, man. That would look really nice. And then what was the other ones? And of course, Avengers Disassembled was happening as the main book.
And that
what was
was-
happening
that was
with
all-
Iron Man
that-
though? They did an Iron Man
Avengers
Disassembled too, didn't they?
Disassembled, They did do Iron Man Disassembled, but Avengers Disassembled was the Ultron, all the Ultrons.
Yeah, that's when Scarlet Witch went nuts and everybody showed up and blew the fucking shit out of the Avengers mansion and Vision fucking self-destructed.
But that
and all
wasn't
shit.
that didn't go straight into House of M, did it? Or was that?
No, the House of M was later.
messing up my-
House of because what happened? That's when Brian Michael Bendis took over from Chuck Austin on Avengers, and so the last 4 issues of Avengers, he just blew everything up via the Scarlet Witch, and then they restarted with the New Avengers. And a little ways into New Avengers, that's when House of M came about because we'd already established that Scarlet Witch was bug nuts crazy, and so that's why No More Mutants happens.
Okay.
What were we talking about?
Yeah, we got lost again. No.
I don't know.
So like the Thor runs though, what it sounds to me too like one of the appeals to Thor is you can just fucking blow shit up. Like things can get really big, really epic, really fucking crazy when you need it to get people's attention.
I've always liked, and I've been teased by this from a couple of my buddies who also read comics. I like the big power, the Supermans, the Martian Manhunters, the Thors, Hulk. You know, the people who, when they wreck shit gets wrecked. And I do remember that comic. I had read X-Men before I had come across that Thor vs. Juggernaut comic and knew what a badass Juggernaut was. The fight scene was just so cool in that Juggernaut Thor comic, and just seeing that Thor could go toe to toe with.
Doesn't he like knock Juggernaut's helmet off?
Yeah.
And that's how he beats him?
But everybody fucking knocks Juggernaut's helmet off. That's the problem.
that's fine.
Yeah,
But
he's the baddest motherfucker
I'm remembering
until that
this
happens.
issue. I'm
He
remembering this issue.
spins his hammer and somehow hooks Juggernaut's hand in the hammer and flies him out to space or whatever. It was cool.
And you were like, wow, Juggernaut wrecks all the X-Men.
Yeah.
And then you get to Thor,
exactly.
and Thor just handles him, like in an issue, and just fucking handles him. Yeah. And you're like, whoa, I'm on a different level.
Well, and he didn't.
That wasn't part of the X
He didn't
Avengers,
beat
was
that
it?
ass. No.
Okay.
no.
'Cause I remember that's
but
one
I
of the-
mean, it was like, dude, this dude's going toe to toe with the toughest dude that I've seen in comics. I'm like, this dude's cool. So that's.
So you can like, okay, X-Men are here. Thor is up here somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? Where like if Juggernaut can handle the X-Men, Thor could easily handle the
Yeah.
X-Men then. So the adventures, the shit Thor is having to deal with is just a different level, right?
You're just right in Max Wheelhouse because he's always loved the whole, okay, if this guy beats this guy, then this, and the hierarchy, the
plus B
established
equals
history.
There is a hierarchy. There is. There are benchmarks in the Marvel Universe. That's why whenever I would read Avengers, you're like, hey, I thought Thor was here last issue. And it's because, they would mention a blurb. Thor had to go to some other dimension because it's time for them to fight somebody that Thor could handle all by himself. And I know they got to do that
So
shit.
now we have living lightning in his place.
Right, and they'll do that. So Thor had to handle something up in Asgard, or his pager went off or whatever, and he had to go run off. And that's what they got to do. So he's a different level. Just like what I was saying, I never bought shit for Hulk comic books, but if I saw Hulk was going to be in somebody's comic book, you pick it up and you flip through it, right? Because it's fuck Hulk. Whoever's comic book he's in, they're going to fight at some point, and you want to see how this guy's handling Hulk, because Hulk's the strength benchmark in the Marvel universe. Mr. Fantastic is the intellect benchmark.
Yeah.
Like Tony Stark's smart, so-and-so smart. Black Panther's smart. None of them are Mr. Fantastic smart. Mr. Fantastic's that guy on a different level, and Thor's up there on that different level where it's hard to have him in team books because he's Thor. You know what I mean?
Thor was also, for me, a fun character. As far as sports, I like combat sports. I wrestled in high school and college. I like to watch fights. And usually with Thor comics, he was duking it out with somebody. And then usually somebody powerful. You fight Ulik and he's a big troll.
With the big brass knuckles,
yeah,
right?
the big brass knuckles. And Lear, Lord of Lightning, another big tough guy. And just big...
Curse.
It wasn't always... Yeah, Curse. He wasn't always fighting...
Who looked awesome, and they ruined him in the movie. He looked he looked Predator in the movie. Oh, I was so pissed off. Curse is like one of my... I just remember his first appearance with, what do you call it? Simonson drew that, and he's all like orange and red with the cool, like, cowl almost, with the spike sticking out of it. And then you get to a movie where normally they can make them look even more badass, and they, like, made him look like Predator. And I was like, are you freaking serious? Like, this was the one guy you didn't need to screw with, and you... Sorry, that was a little... But yeah, anyway, the dudes the dudes he's fighting are just these crazy beings,
it's just,
right?
and it wasn't... Sometimes I don't think you need all the intricate story. Sometimes I think you just need a book to watch somebody get their ass kicked, I just, there's sometimes granted more when I was younger, as a kid, but there's times I just want to open up, like to me, a World War Hulk book or a Planet Hulk was like, man, it should have been fucking war from beginning to end, and it was for the most part in Planet Hulk. Said World War Hulk, I only looked at 1 or 2 pages and vomited, but...
Okay.
That's why he likes Thor.
Yeah.
Well, my problem too is I got into Conan, and for me, Conan was like kind of the unfiltered Thor, where he's gonna be fucking them big titty broads, and he's gonna chop motherfuckers up, and he's just like that fucking Unbound id, where it's all about like woof, where you're watching it to see him chop motherfuckers to pieces. And the individual stories, they can be fun, they can have a nice little adventure, he can go do some robbing and shit. But ultimately, I wanted my Conan books to be about fucking chopping motherfuckers up.
You know what? You make a good point too, as far as saying that the Marvel Thor didn't stick to the folk tales or anything that much, whereas the Conan comics stuck to that world.
The Robert E. Howards.
Of Robert E. Howards. I mean,
Hyborian Age.
I have a bunch of the collections of the essential Savage Sword of Conans, and dude, those are solid. Those are solid reads now.
Yeah, and they had all those great Filipino and Spanish artists working on it too. They're gorgeous books.
Yes. I mean, but stuck to the material, and Conan really was. Yeah, he was Thor. But you take the pussiness.
Well, see, that's Conan. Marvel doesn't own Conan, Marvel, and now Conan's published by Dark Horse. He's out of the family. I always wanted to see Thor do that, fucking just step up and fucking smash motherfuckers in the face with a hammer and kill motherfuckers. One thing that I liked about Kirby's New Gods when he moved over to DC, and it's something of course they fucked up because they always fuck everything up, is that my feeling was that Kirby created some goofy ass villains in the New Gods, like the Thunderbar and the fucking Deep Six and all these dumbasses. I think he did that specifically so that those motherfuckers could get killed by Orion. And in particular, what turned me into an Orion fan was there was one instance where they killed a bunch of innocent people, and Orion's got one of the Deep Six guys, and he's just fucking breaking this guy down, just fucking destroying him. And the dude's like, "Stop! You're gonna kill me." He's like, "I know I'm gonna fucking kill you. That's what I'm fucking trying to do." And then he fucking kills him. And my feeling was that Kirby did it because he knew that if he did good villains, they'd have to bring him back. They just can't help themselves. So he'd create shit villains so that his fucking Orion could kill the fuck out of those villains and show what a fucking badass berserker son of a bitch the Orion is. And that's what turned me into an Orion fan. And they never fucking get that right in the comics. And for me, I really wanted that from Thor too. I want Thor to fucking just take some weird ass alien motherfucker or some mythological creature and just fucking destroy, like Walking Dead, just fucking Negan with the fucking Lucille, destroy these motherfuckers. Yeah. And I could get off to that. And it seems like in recent years, that's what they're doing. Like Jason Aaron and Garth Ennis. If I got that Thor more often, or have I got it younger too? Because I've gotten to the point where it's not as appealing to me as it used to be. But if I were 13 years old and I was seeing Thor just destroy fucking Mangog or whatever that dude's name is with the fucking just blah blah blah, I think I'd be a bigger Thor fan than I am. But I respect a lot of stuff that was done, like Simonson did, huh?
No, he's a girl.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting to me, but not enough for me to pick it up because I need more than just, hey, Thor's a chick now, and it's cool that it ties into the old continuity with it being Jane Foster and stuff. But is she fucking destroying Mangog with her fucking hammer? I haven't seen that happen yet, so I'm not as into it as I could be.
I did like him walking around with a fucking axe.
Oh yeah, because it's like his childhood weapon before he switched over to the hammer, right?
Yeah, well, supposedly he cracked the Celestial's armor with it. So
Oh, cool.
It's got its own magic properties.
Did they ever reveal what disgraced him so he couldn't be the official Thor anymore? Did they ever get into that yet?
We dropped it.
Finish up the series, but no, I haven't got there yet.
Maybe they're just holding that back. What else was I talking about? Have you read any of Walt Simonson?
Probably just fucking touching himself. Isn't that a sin? I mean, would he be worthy? Oh, wait, no, that's under Christian. Never mind.
Different mythology.
I think Pee Wee Herman and Thor, I can see where you'd have a little overlap there. It makes perfect sense. But have you read any of Walt?
Not to be worthy. What the hell did he do?
Right.
Seriously, like in realistic,
You think it's going to be the opposite
when
direction?
you
He's a
die,
pussy
your
or he
wife
spared somebody
your
or something?
buddies all get to rape your wife and then they throw her on top of you and light it on fire. There's a little history for your Viking story.
It's good that we've got the show that we've got. We can keep that kind of shit. Have you read any of Walt Simonson's Ragnarok series for IDW?
No.
I was just curious because it looks to me like he's gone, like doing Thor his way on that book, and it looks kind of interesting to me. It looks fucking kind of dark and cool and, overwrought the way that Simonson does with all the cool lines and shit where it's like sci-fi old world shit. He does a good job of like combining those two things. It's called Ragnarok. Yeah, he's been doing it at IDW for a little while, so I was just curious if that was something you followed.
See if I can get a hold of some of the trades.
Walt Simonson's a treasure.
The one other thing too is the villains. Everybody goes to Loki, especially because of the movies now. And Loki seems like, and I've complained about this in the past, I don't like Red Skull very much because they just beat me over the head with Red Skull the whole time I've read Captain America stuff. I just get sick of that guy because it's always about Red Skull. And it feels like
they do a lot with that with Loki, but he's got some badass villains. I mean, he's got some powerhouses. The Frost Giants.
Well, with Loki,
are the Frost Giants in the comics similar to the ones in the movie, or how,
they look like?
Well, they're made of ice. I think like recently now they're more
humanoid.
Yeah.
More like
See, I'm trying to remember.
Walkers.
I think I remember from Old Hot Moo where they have like this big ice creature. Was there like named ones that were like hero Frost Giants, or were they all just big ice dudes?
Like Burr or Gamir?
Was it Frost Giant or IKEA Furniture? There's a game we could play.
They're from Jotunheim, right?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah.
That's a twin bed, I think.
Jotunheim. I thought that was
that a vase, maybe?
One of the options at the rub and tug I go to. I'll take the Jotunheim this week.
Mac was talking about Curse, and Curse does look
Next
cool
time,
too.
140. You take too long.
No, we're cutting that up.
Mac was talking about Curse. I always thought the Executioner was the badass looking dude. Cool. And then another one of those comics that I didn't buy as a kid that I regret is that scene where Executioner is trying to secure the bridge, and he's got like AK-40, no, not AKs, M16s in either hand. I loved when they had that big war. They did a Marvel Age annual where it's just a 2-page spread, and Thor's at like an anti-aircraft gun just shooting at fucking, I guess it was Frost Giants or some shit like that. And I loved, kind of like Highlander, where all of a sudden Thor's like incorporating all this modern technology, but he's still having those medieval savage battles. And that was just so cool, that contrast of the two different worlds at the same time. But Executioner especially, running around with those M16s, I just thought was so fucking hardcore. The dude's name's Executioner. He's got an all black armor. He's got this sick cut to his hair and shit. And I understand they're going to actually have him in the third Thor movie, but that is Executioner as cool as he looks, or is he a fucking piker? Because I know he also hung out with Enchantress all the time, and he did Masters of Evil and shit. Yeah, he always seemed like kind of a muscle, and he just seemed like he would be a badass dude. Is he like just muscle, or is there more to this dude?
From what I remember, he's just muscle.
He's muscle. That fucking sucks. Enchantress though is awesome. I think I love. Yeah,
he had a big part with Thunderstrike.
Yeah,
and it was because it was his axe. It was his axe that Thor eventually killed that other god guy. I can't think of his name. The
The one from the Jurgens run?
Yeah.
Okay. Was he still dead at that time? Because they resurrected him eventually, right? They never brought him back? No, I mean, Executioner.
Oh, no, the Executioner's back.
Yeah.
But
Was he still dead at the time that happened, though?
Thor called on someone to bring him the axe, and I can't remember who it was.
Leave it alone. What about Enchantress? Enchantress, for me, of all the Thor comics I've read, which admittedly isn't a ton of them, but she was such an important figure throughout the Deodato run, you could call it. And I liked her being like the sultry and, schemer, and I like that she had kind of a different vibe where she was a little bit more of an anti-hero than Loki seemed to be, where Loki seemed to be like more full-on villain. She could cross both sides.
She was like that, but for Thor in that run with Jurgens.
Because I think
in the alternate universe, and it was something that they hadn't done with her before. She was a loving wife. Like, she loved him. She was standing by him no matter what. She was gonna kill whoever it took if they got near him, and it was about that she loved him. And she'd do fucking shitty stuff, but it wasn't to him. It was, he's my husband.
Those are fascinating characters where they've got that good quality to them, but at the same time they're really fucking shitty too. For me, that was like one of my best windows into Thor's world, was Enchantress being throughout Secret Wars. And again, her good and bad, where she's kind of fucked up hearing that Asgard, I think, had gotten blown up again or some shit, or was imperiled in some major way, and she's trying to get back from the Beyonder world specifically to help out Asgard. So I could tell she was still fucking evil. She did awful shit like steal the life force from Volcana, but she's doing it to get back to Asgard to try to save people before that shit happens. How big of a deal was Enchantress throughout the Thor run? Like, was she a big deal in the 60s and 70s, or?
You're asking the wrong guy.
Okay, but she's a big deal these days, though. She's still important to the Thor mythos.
Fixit.
I don't remember.
I
remember Helia, whatever her name
Hela,
is. Hela coming up a lot in the
Lately.
run. Yeah, she came up a lot.
You know what's funny, going back to that whole was Thor acting like a Viking thing, now that I think about it, when he was King Thor and he was running shit on Earth and Enchantress was his wife, that's probably the most Viking-like that he ever was, and yet that's kind of like his villain story, But I mean, that's how a Viking probably would have acted more. Hey, he was king, because he had the Odin Force at the time too.
Sounds so awesome. The Odin Force sounds so amazing.
Dude, I wish that they'd fucking kill that. I read some article recently where they were talking about that too. Like, they were ranking superheroes, and they're like, Thor with Odin Force.
Oh,
and
that's
it's
dumb.
Like, come on. Odin Force is stupid. They should he has magic. That's it. You know what I mean?
Well, didn't
Odin Force sounds like a crazy ass metal band or something.
from the Netherlands
We are Odin Force.
with our song Thor, Thor, Thor.
This is written for my mother. Love you, mother. This is written for my dearly beloved uncle who passed away a fortnight ago from some sort of cancer. I love you, Uncle Bobby. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. This has been Odin Force. Please stop by merch booth.
That was good. That was good, Mac.
So we had a new WordPress blog follow from Stormchaser2162, Tumblr follow from Isabel Neville, new Twitter follows from Bellringer, Comic Blitz, David Gallagher, writer of The Only Living Boy, available from Paper Cuts, David the producer, DJ and Rappers Holla, Good Times, Great Movies Cast, Keith at Captain Halloween, The Mockers Podcast, Pascal Guyon, Princess, Bride of the Monster, The Science Patrol, Sean Glumace, Shalita Burke, and Glenn Walker. Follow Fridays came from Adam Blackmoon, Dr. G Nerdologist, The Film and Water Podcast, and Son of Cthulhu. I think Bone Dragon comic might have been in there somewhere as well. We got retweets from Ange, Comic Reflections, Firestorm Fan, It's Plastic Man, Not Guano Man, Professor Alan Middleton, Duran Domitable, Stephen Whistler, and Willie at Common Joy Life, as well as favorites from Bill Bear, Brandon Mulally, Cinemystique, Constant Taylor, David Fior, David Golding, The Hammer Strikes, Jesse Fernandez, Josh O, Kevin Culp, King Size Comics, Giant Size Fun Podcast, Nethead, Poop Culture Podcast, Randy the Miserable Retail Slave, Ryan Daly, Sean McLaughlin, So Wizard, Podcast, Work Up, and Words and Pictures. Storm Chaser wrote of episode 15, Tiger the Werewoman. Do you notice how Englehart took what started as a feminist character and turned her into the WCA booty call? I was listening to an older episode of the show and heard that Frank was a fan of martial law. I used to love ML back in the day. Sleepman was extremely creepy, and I loved the one-shot Kingdom of the Blind and the satirical analog of Batman. The one-shot with the hero zombies was funny, but things seemed to fall apart pretty quickly after that, especially the crossover with Hellraiser. I've been listening to the older episodes, and you guys have actually sparked some interest in me for Namor. What do you think of his role as part of the Illuminati and in Hickman's new Avengers? It also looks like James Robinson is already working on hitting the do-over button on Namor's death in Squadron Supreme. Hell yeah on the Ditko, Objectivism, Watchmen rant. Yeah, I personally thought that Namor was a really good inclusion in the Illuminati. He's one of those guys who, if you're going to have a group that has some degree of objective amorality, he should definitely be a part of it. I think that they probably went overboard with whatever he did with T'Challa that caused T'Challa to try to kill him. I think he's supposed to have flooded Wakanda and killed a whole bunch of people. And I realized that they tried to minimize that by, I think he was possessed by the Phoenix Force and blah, blah, blah. But it was a real dick move on their part. It's a character that already has enough trouble without trying to put the burden of that kind of genocidal activity on his back. One of the reasons why I'm not as big of a Marvel fan as I used to be is that they're constantly hitting the reset button. Nobody ever dies at Marvel. When I was growing up, the three absolutes were that Uncle Ben, Gwen Stacy, and Bucky all stay dead, and two of those three are now alive and headlining series. So death is completely meaningless in the Marvel Universe, and if they kill a character off, I usually don't even think about it for very long because they'll be back before you know it. As far as martial law, when we were actively working on the Underguides podcast, which is yet another stream, which I'm sure Mac appreciates. One of the good things about that, though, is that people don't notice that it's been nearly a year since we've updated that podcast. And I do have material, and I do intend to go back and edit some of the material that we have, but I can't say exactly when because I know that September and October is going to be pretty packed for our feed. But when we were working on Underguides, I made a point of putting a copy of the original martial law miniseries in Mac's hands, and it collected dust on a shelf for a long time. I also have bought as a present the DC Omnibus edition of the martial law, which collected most of the early miniseries. Mister Fixit has that in his possession, but he keeps reading library books instead. So at some point, we definitely want to look at the martial law material, but we just haven't gotten there yet. I do think that the original miniseries and the handful of specials that followed it were the best martial law material, especially because they had that one summer where I think they tried to do the Hellraiser crossover and the Secret Tribunal miniseries at the same time. And the Hellraiser miniseries, I think, really suffered for that. I also don't have strong recollections of the Savage Dragon miniseries, but I'm thinking it wasn't very good, but I'm sure it being published in black and white was a major issue for me as well. The painted color over Kevin O'Neill's artwork was very important to the look of martial law. So to publish him with just black and white art line work, that's just not going to cut it. I don't think that's ever been reprinted either. I know I've bought multiple collections of the later martial law material in hopes of getting a color version of that story, and I can't recall if it ever actually happened or not. I could see the issue with the Hellraiser crossover because then you'd have to deal with licensing from Clive Barker, but I would think that Eric Larson would be game. Also, they put out a martial law novella, I think Titan Books did it, which collected two stories that were Pat Mills, I think, adapting stories he'd intended to do as comic books into prose. And the book had two stories in it. I only ever read the first one, and it wasn't very strong either, so I'm not anxious for them to do any more martial law material. I think that they've bled that vein dry. But the original stuff is very good. I think it still holds up as a criticism of the industry and the problematic nature of superheroes in general if you look at them with any perspective. Also, Grant sent us the video for the Nine Inch Nails song Ruiner. I'm pretty sure that was directed at me. I'll take that. It's a pretty solid song too. Martin Gray wrote of the Doctor Strange trailer. I'm a Brit and even I get sick of the likes of Hugh Laurie's rubbish accent, which Cumberbatch nicks. As a Yank, I actually am pretty much fine with Hugh Laurie's accent. The girlfriend watches a lot of House. I think he sounds pretty good in it. I couldn't tell you what specific region his character's supposed to be from, but for general American accent, I have no problems with it. I think it's stronger than Cumberbatch's though. And I still kind of wish Hugh Laurie was Doctor Strange. This of course assumes that Marvel doesn't have the balls to cast my first choice John Cho, which given how much shit Mac especially gave me over that, to see the trending of starring John Cho on the Twitters and such, I feel a little validated. Okay, Jason Martinez let us know that he was listening to the Marvel Superheroes podcast episodes Satana, the Devil's Daughter, and Wild Agents of Marvel, Curtis the Shadow. Cal Drunkula wrote of episode 60. Fun fact, if you critique Diabolu Frank's use of promos in one episode, he uses all of your promos on the next. And tweeted, "This is a great show. Though it's easy to pretend, I know you're not a fool." Odell Abner Dracula wrote, "I don't think I've seen that Art Adams cover before," which is referring to the album art for the summer special, which was taken from, I believe, issue 8 8 of the Marvel Superheroes anthology from the early 90s. He continues, that Cable is Ahab red herring sticks with me. Also, all the 85 X-Men annual, holy God. Dr. G seconded that emotion. Word. His X-Men annuals were my jam. Yeah, the Art Adams X-Men annuals are like a high water mark for comic book art. I don't know whoever's going to touch those. Illegal Machine wrote the episode, I was crying laughing at my desk while I was listening, and I was there. Yeah, I laughed while I was editing the episode too. I think it's just good, ridiculous fun. Storm Chaser wrote, cue that sexy 80s pop music saxophone. To which Raven Enfield noted, and I just listened to the entire last 6 minutes. Good Lord. Firestorm fan continued, what the fuck are you making me suffer through on the end of the latest Marvel Superheroes podcast? Seriously, even at 1.6 speed with silence trimmed, it's unbearable. I never want to hear Careless Whisper ever again. Thanks for murdering the 1980s for me. Oh, and thanks for pimping David's role in the Ultraverse podcast. Go twerk yourself, Frank. Yeah, David Ace Gutierrez was an awesome podcaster. I'd like to hear him do some more stuff without being saddled with that other guy that was just totally dragging down the Ultraverse podcast. And finally, the Merry Marvel Marching Society, the 108th Sage, Adam Blackmoon, Andrew in Belfast, Bone Dragon Comics, Cash Flag, Chris Sheehan, Coffee and Comics Blog, Darren and Ruth Sutherland, Dr. G Nerdologist, Eric Mannix, FKA Jason. I don't know if I'm supposed to render that as formerly known as Jason, or just call him Jay like everybody else does on their podcast. I figure I should respect the handle you guys use on Twitter and use that name instead of whatever other names you might have. You guys can let me know if you have any preferences, though. Moving on. Gold Mine Productions, The Hammer Strikes, Jake and Tom Conquer Podcast, Julia Clavian, Keith G. Baker, Kevin Dodgy, Martin Gray, Michael Dabb, aka Michael Wagner, but see, he's going by Michael Dabb now, so I'm using that name. Respect, y'all. Mikey Flash, Monsters and Mystics, Moviesaurus Rex, Now That I'm Older, Odell Abner Dracula, Open All Powers Podcast, Oscar Blue Devil, The Park Fanatic Podcast, Pietro Blacksamoff, Rabbit Stew Comics, Randy Caldwell, Richard Field, The Silver and Gold Podcast, Son of Cthulhu, Storm Chaser 2162, Senadalia Scarecrow, Trekker Talk, Warlord Worlds, and Xenozoic Xenophiles.
The Marvel Superheroes Podcast is in no way affiliated with or endorsed by Marvel Entertainment. All characters mentioned and audio clips employed are believed covered under fair use, with no infringement intended against their copyright holders. The views expressed in this podcast are assumed legitimate, truthful, and solely possessed by the speaker.
Merely zero, do not howl, do not moan. You can be a superhero marching right along through the Viking song of the Merry Marvel Marching Society.
I was bullied a lot as a child. I never had a magic hammer where I could whack the shit out of people who bullied me.
I want the truth.
That's legit. That's actually not. I don't know if that was true or not, but I can see that.
I'm just going to leave that to interpretation. You know who you are, motherfuckers.